Good morning. All right, Mayor Bennett, I do think we're ready to start the meeting if you can hear me.
I can definitely hear you. All right, I'll call this meeting to order of the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. As always, press 6 on your phones if you're calling in, and mute or unmute yourself. As permitted by the governor's disaster declaration dated February 4th, 2022, the determination has been made that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent for this board. To ensure the transparent and open meeting as possible, the meeting materials were posted 1 week in advance, and a recording of this meeting will be provided and linked to our website, and all votes will be taken by roll call. And that I will segue into calling the roll, Erin.
All right, thank you very much. Mayor Bennett?
Present.
Frank Beal?
Present.
President Brawley? President Arch?
Here.
Paul Goodrich? See him on, we'll confirm with him. Jim Healy? Nina Idamudia?
Present.
Mayor Noak?
Here.
President Reinbold?
Here.
President Rotering? Mayor Rotering? Stefan Schaefer?
Present.
Carolyn Schofield?
Here.
Ann Sheehan?
Here.
Matt Walsh?
Present.
And Diane Williams.
Present.
Nancy Rotering is here. Couldn't unmute. Thanks.
Yep, sounds good. I just saw that. Thank you. All right,
Didn't have a trigger finger, huh? Okay. We do have a quorum.
I'm sorry,
I'm
this is
sorry.
I'm health person.
Thank you. I was looking at the wrong list that I have here. Yep, we have Dr. Corazon, and then Leanne Redden was unable to attend.
Again, we have a quorum, and before the board is approval of the minutes. Please identify yourself on the motion.
So moved, Noak.
Second, Diane.
Moved and seconded. Aaron will call the roll.
Mayor Bennett?
Yes. Or
Frank
here.
Beal?
Yes.
President Brawley? Mayor Darch?
Yes.
Paul Goodrich? Jim Healy? Nina Idamudia?
Yes, sorry, I couldn't find the mute button. Unmute.
It's okay here. Mayor Noak?
Yes.
President Reinbold?
Yes.
Mayor Rotering?
Yes.
Stefan Schaefer?
Yes.
Carolyn Schofield?
Yes.
Ann Sheehan?
Yes.
Matt Walsh?
Yes.
Diane Williams.
Yes.
And the motion carries. First item on the agenda is the Executive Director's Report. Aaron, from Washington, D.C.
Live from Washington this morning. I wanted to start off by saying that we continue to work with our county board chairs and the city of Chicago and their respective economic development organizations to work towards a few regional activities that will be focused on growing our economy. To that end, I met with Cook County's Economic Development or Economic Advisors Committee earlier this last month, sharing information about the work that we're doing jointly with the Brookings Institution and funded by the Chicago Community Trust. In March, we plan to convene the 7 county board chairs, City of Chicago, their economic development organizations, and a series of public and private sector and business leaders from across the region to set some strategies that will expand economic opportunity and growth post-COVID, but also to help us head off this sustained sort of slow period of growth that we've had that's been pretty slow. The other thing I wanted to highlight for you that's related to economic development is that our region and the state, through this Clean Tech Economy Coalition that's being led by MHub of Chicago, was selected as one of 60 finalists for the U.S. Department of Economic Development Administration's Build Back Better Regional Challenge. The 60 coalitions across the country will compete for up to $100 million as part of the American Rescue Plan program. I'm part of the selection advisory committee for the coalition. We recently held some kickoff meetings, discussed the long-term governance of the project overall, but really it's about activating industries that increase opportunities for clean technology utilization, thinking about the national labs that are here in our region and partnering with them, and then also partnering with workforce opportunities to build these pipelines of projects that can be that can spark growth in the clean tech economy here in our region. The phase 2 deadline for that project submittal is March 15th, 2022. Also wanted to provide a note of update on our committees. So since the approval last month of both the Climate Committee and the Regional Economy Committee, we've identified staff liaisons for the committees. We've been working on filling the committee's rosters and notified members of our intent to have them involved. Our liaisons are working to establish draft agendas, materials for the committees, and then reorienting members on the goals of 2050 and the objectives of our strategic direction and the roles and responsibilities. So at the request of the board last month, we continue to work with our counties to make sure that the membership is representative of all of the interests and parties that need to be at the table here. So we anticipate bringing a more robust update to you at your March meeting. And we anticipate that the committees will start meeting late March. So in addition, we're meeting with the Transportation Committee. We had a meeting with them earlier this month, and we'll have another meeting with them late February to discuss their intersection with the Climate and the Regional Economy Committee as well, and to discuss some of the working groups that will need to execute the federal infrastructure bill successfully. In terms of our mobility recovery work, our team has been hard at work analyzing possible future scenarios post-COVID for our region's transportation system. We continue to meet with each of the service boards and the RTA to talk about our preliminary modeling results, and we'll be sharing this information with additional stakeholders and transportation implementers this week. We will plan to bring those key takeaways and possible future regional activities to you in March again for further discussion and input. And sort of on a related note, we had the opportunity to sit down with some representatives from the Northwest suburbs, Mayor McLeod from Hoffman Estates, Mayor Craig from Hanover Park, and Trustee Canty from Arlington Heights, along with Cook County Commissioner Morrison, to discuss their perspectives on mobility strategies that will be needed to help the region recover from COVID-19. They were really interested in multimodal connections for their communities and were interested in continuing to advance this work together with us. So always exciting to have new partners. As a reminder, we mentioned this last month, but FHWA and the FTA will be conducting a joint certification review of the transportation planning process here across our region, March 8th through the 10th. These reviews will be held in accordance with Title 23, which requires a review of all of the transportation planning processes in the metropolitan region. So this review will determine whether the transportation planning process can be certified as implementing the federal transportation planning process. So there will be opportunities for you as board members to weigh in at your convenience. So typically what would happen in a normal year is that there would be sort of an open house style opportunity for folks to come in and talk with FHWA and FTA about your perspective about our work in the region. So just wanted to make sure that I was flagging that for you, that will be coming. In terms of state and federal legislative stuff, last week Governor Pritzker presented his proposed FY23 budget. We're currently analyzing the budget documents to better understand the implications for our region. You know, I know one of the things that we were looking at is the governor's proposal, which includes a one-year freeze on the annual inflation-based increase in the MFT, which the governor's office management and budget estimates will cost about $125 million from the road fund, depending on the final rate of inflation. You know, when Rebuild Illinois capital plan was enacted in 2019, it raised the MFT, motor fuel taxes, and indexed it to inflation. It's a long recommendation of our 2050 plan, which gives the region and the state a sustainable source of revenue for funding critical transportation infrastructure. If the freeze passes, you know, the governor's proposal could have negative long-term impacts for the transportation funds here in our region and for our transit providers. So we're going to continue to watch that moving forward. Staff is also monitoring budgetary negotiations and continue to track and analyze relevant legislative proposals. The deadline for bills, bill introduction is passed, and the deadlines for bills out of committee in the Senate is Thursday, February 10th. Deadline for the House is Friday, February 18th. So we again will bring bills to the board in March for discussion. Also on note of bills, I wanted to note that we are aware of House Bill 4608 filed by Representative Delgado in the House and its companion bill, Senate Bill 3848 filed by Senator Villavelom in the Senate. The bill would require CMAP and the Regional Transportation Authority to develop a detailed report that has next steps for funding the transit system. You know, currently, both of our agencies have a number of ongoing initiatives that line up well with the intent of this legislation, and we look forward to continuing to work with RTA towards sharing, you know, our shared goal of having a fully funded transit and transportation system here. So we're going to continue again to watch that. We'll have more updates at our next meeting with you. And then As Mayor Bennett mentioned, I've been in DC this week with the National Association of Regional Councils and meeting with our congressional delegation. I think just a couple key takeaways from the initial meetings that we've had is that our peers are facing many of the same capacity challenges across the country as we are, and I know as you are as well. But everyone's focused on the implementation of the infrastructure bill. You know, we've had meetings with US DOT, with HUD, with EPA, with NOAA, with Economic Development Administration as well, and leadership from the US offices. They're really focused on implementation, on making sure that this funding gets put out in meaningful ways. We've heard lots about equity, lots about making sure that disconnected communities across our country are connected to resources and opportunity in meaningful ways, and really making sure that communities that have limited capacity can access these new resources. So it's in line with a lot of the work that we do. It was refreshing to hear, but you know, there's a lot of work on the horizon here. So we've met again with a number of congressional leaders and are focused on talking about the opportunities for CMAP to support the region in implementing these bills, and making sure that there's a strong awareness that Congress needs to pass a budget so that we can access these funds. So I know that there was some movement on that on the House side, I believe, yesterday, but again, without that fully funded federal budget, a number of these programs don't come to fruition until that happens. I know Mayor Noak was reappointed to the National League of Cities Transportation and Infrastructure Federal Advocacy Committee, so congratulations to you. And then my last note here this morning is just that it's really bittersweet for me to share this with you all, but it's Gordon Smith's last week. You know, Gordon has really been instrumental for the formation of CMAP, for a number of legislative initiatives, getting the agency up and running. He's been with us for over 16 years. We are sad to see him leave, but we do wish him all the best as he leaves his career in public service. I hear he'll be working for a local engineering firm, so he might not be all that far away. I'm certain we'll see him around. I don't know, Gordon, are you on the line?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Gordon. I know this board has worked with you for quite some time on a number of initiatives, and we really appreciate you. Mayor Bennett, that concludes my report.
Thanks, and if I can kind of jump in on Gordon, you know, Frank certainly knows, and some of the early members should know that Gordon was instrumental, along with Randy Blankenhorn, when they both worked for IDOT, to help push the legislation that created the planning, Chicago Planning organization. And I know, working with the Metro 2020 group years and years ago, right, Frank, that Gordon was just so key in getting that through a maze of multiple counties and municipalities and convincing everybody it was the right thing to do. And then, even more importantly, when we formed the organization, he, along with Randy, came on board, and Gordon, in fact, I talked to him last week. We were kind of reminiscing about all the craziness that took place when we first started this agency, and the work that had to take place downstate in Springfield, and the obstacles that we faced. And Gordon was a true trooper in the beginning, and has been since then, helping us in the maze of the General Assembly with his contacts and getting the support that we needed. So, Gordon, personally, I'm certainly going to miss you being part of this agency anymore. And I know, as you said, as you enter the private sector, you'll still be around. And we hope to see you in the near future.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
You're welcome, Gordon. Good luck. All right, moving on to item 5 under procurements and contracts. Angela.
Hold on, Chairman. Some audio issues right there. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you and see your report.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Today I'm seeking approval for 2 procurements. The first one, I'm seeking a vendor limit increase to $297,016 with AECom to provide project management services for the pavement management plan program. And I'm also seeking approval today to enter into a contract with Paytech in the amount of $150,000 to implement the agency's new human capital management system.
Are there questions of Angela regarding those items? The chair will entertain a motion on both of those items.
I move approval.
Second, Reinbold.
Moved and seconded. Again, any further questions, comments? Aaron, call the roll.
Mayor Bennett,
Aye.
Frank Beal,
Aye.
President Brawley, President Darch,
Aye.
Paul Goodrich, Jim Healy, Nina Itamudia,
Aye.
Mayor Noak,
Yes.
President Reinbold,
Aye.
Mayor Rotering,
Aye.
Stefan Schaefer,
Yes.
Carolyn Schofield,
Yes.
Ann Sheehan,
Yes.
Matt Walsh,
Yes.
Diane Williams.
Yes.
The motion carries. Angela, thank you. And then moving on to item 6, which is pretty extensive, a lot of information to download if you're going to do it that way. But it was quite an extensive report. The executive committee has already heard an overview of the audit that will be presented, and also we will be talking about the upcoming budget. So, Angela, I'm going to turn it over to you again.
Yes, in the interest of time, I'll just introduce Jim with Seekage. He will do a quick presentation on our FY21 fiscal audit and financial statements. Jim, I believe he's on the call.
Yep, I'm here.
Thank you, Jim.
And Martha's here as well. Thanks, Angela. Thanks, Mr. Chairman, for your time here today. Want to thank too Aaron, Angela, Molly, Caleb, and the entire staff also for their help throughout the audit process. They were able to answer all our questions, get us documents that we needed. So I want to thank them very much for that. What I'll do is, like I typically do, go through the annual financial report and independent auditors report, as well as the board communication report, and then be happy to answer any questions that you might have. I'm going to start with the annual financial report. That's the larger report. And I'll go through the table of contents just to give you an idea of what's in the report. As government reports go, it's not huge, but it is about 50 some pages. So there's a lot of information here. So I just want to give you a quick overview of what's in the report. On the table of contents, pages 1 through 3 is the independent auditors report. And then after that is the management discussion and analysis. I'll talk about both those documents in a second here. The management discussion analysis starts off the general purpose external financial statements. So that's the main section of the report. You'll see the basic financial statements. There's a statement of net position, your balance sheet, the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. That's your income statement. There's also a statement of cash flows. And then on pages 7 through 33, there's a whole lot of additional information that kind of supports those basic financial statements and should be read in conjunction with them. After that is the required supplementary information, or I may refer to it as the RSI. There's some information on your participation in IMRF, as well as the state employee retirement system, and then your other post-employment benefit plan or your retiree health plan. So I'll go through a couple of those schedules real quick as well. After that's the supplementary information. So there's a really useful budget versus actual report on pages 40, as well as some detailed schedule on the grants, so receipts, expenditures, and balances. There's some other support for your calculation of fringe benefits and the indirect cost rates. And then after that is the single audit information. So there's 2 reports that we issue related to the single audit. Those are on pages 48 through 51. And then the schedule of expenditures of federal awards is on pages 52 and 53. I'll talk about that real quickly. And then I'll also go through the schedule of findings and question costs on pages 55 through 56. So what I'll start with is the independent auditors report. So these 3 pages, and then also the 2 reports we issue related to the single audit, and then the schedule of findings and question costs are what we prepare as auditors. That's what we're responsible for. Management's responsible for the rest of the annual financial report. And those responsibilities are explained here on page 1. On page 2, up at the top, is the opinion paragraph, the paragraph that most people are interested in. And again, this year we issued an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can provide to the agency. After that is the management discussion and analysis. prepared by Angela. A great overview of the agency's financial position and changes in financial position. Points out any significant trends or changes that may have occurred during the year. It has some 3-year comparative data that you can't find elsewhere in the report. So I tell you every year, if you want to read one thing in the report, read the MD&A because it provides a good overview of the agency's finances. After that, we'll get into the basic financial statements. I'll start with a statement of net position on page 4, not MD&A page 4, but actual page 4. Point out just a few variances from 2020 to 2021. You can see up at the top current assets. You'll see cash increased about $2.3 million. And then there was a corresponding decrease in receivables. So you receive cash on some of those receivables. Long-term assets, right below that, you'll see the net pension asset for IMRF went from about 26,000 to about 2.6 million. We'll take a look at that schedule in the RSI in a second, but a big increase there. Capital assets increased quite a bit because you had a lot of leasehold improvements, office furniture with the new office space. That increased about $1.4 million in additions, less depreciation. Under current liabilities, you'll also see AR went down, AP also went down about $1.2 million. Under long-term liabilities, the net pension liability related to the state employee retirement system pretty much stayed the same. There's very little change in that, about $4.7 million liability there. And then net position down at the bottom, investment in capital assets, like I said, that also increased about $1 million due to those improvements at the new office space. Page 5 is the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. You'll see operating income increased from 2020. A lot to do with capitalizing all of those expenses related to the leasehold improvements that was taken out of expense and shown as a capital asset. Also had some really positive adjustments for the pension related to GASB 68. So that helped the bottom line quite a bit as well. Non-operating revenue, the one change there, you'll see there was a loss on disposal of capital assets. That's related to disposals of the leasehold improvements in Willis Tower. And then change in that position, your net income is down at the bottom there, about $4.1 million. Next, and last statement, basic financial statement is page 6, the statement of cash flows. You'll see cash inflows and outflows by activity there. You'll see the net increase in cash that I mentioned previously is about halfway down the page, increase of about $2.3 million. I'll touch base on the RSI real quick. That's on pages, starting on page 36. And what this schedule shows on 36 and 37 is basically your funded status for IMRF. And it shows the last 7 years. IMRF is on a calendar year. So that's the latest information is December 31st, 2020. And like I said previously, the net pension asset increased from 26,000 to $2.6 million. The main reason for that is if you look in the planned fiduciary net position section on page 36, the net investment income, the last 2 calendar years, investment income was $5.3 million and $4.7 million. So some incredible returns the last 2 calendar years. Increased the funded ratio from about 93% to about 108%. So good positive trend there. And then a similar report on page 38, because this is considered a cost sharing plan, this format's a little bit different, but your proportionate share of the state employee retirement system or SERS is that very first percentage. You can see it barely decreased from 2019 to 2020. I think it was like 0.2%. And you'll see the proportionate share basically stayed the same as well. And then the last percentage down at the bottom there is the funded ratio. So we talked about IMRF being funded at 108%. SERS is funded at about 36%. And that's been pretty consistent the last 7 years. And then the last thing I'll point out in the report here is the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. That's on pages 52 and 53. This basically shows all of the year federal expenditures for the year by major program and then non-major program. So we tested as a major program, the assistance listing number 20.205, which is highway planning and construction. And that accounted for about 19.1 million of the 19.7 million that was expended. And then lastly, I point this out every year, but the schedule of findings and question costs on page 55 and 56 provides a really good summary of the results of the financial audit and the single audit. And you can see here, it's in a format that's a little bit easier to look at for the non-accountant and the non-auditor. But you can see the financial statement results. As I said, we had an unmodified opinion and no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. And we didn't note any instances of non-compliance. And for the federal awards, again, no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, and we had an unmodified opinion on that major program. No findings that we disclosed, and then you guys did qualify as a low risk auditee. And then 56 shows any findings. You can see we didn't have any financial statement or federal award findings and no prior year findings as well. So that's all I have for the annual financial report. I'll go through the board communication report real quickly. And again, I'll start with the table of contents. There's some required communication that we have to have with the board every year. That's on pages 2 through 4. Pretty routine communication this year. We didn't issue any new accounting, or we didn't implement any new accounting pronouncements. No disagreements with management, no significant delays in the audit. After that, we are required to communicate any audit adjusting journal entries that we found. These are entries we found as part of the audit process. We just had 2 entries and we noted those on page 5. I'll also point out that we had no what we call past adjusting journal entries. These are entries that were deemed to be immaterial, so we didn't record them, but above a certain floor, we have to communicate that to the board. Didn't have any past adjustments, so everything that needed to be adjusted was adjusted. And finally, the management letter starts on page 6. And if you look on page 7, what this communication does on page 7 is just communicate in writing that there were no material weaknesses. Like I said before, no significant deficiencies, no new deficiencies were noted at all. And then finally, the status of the prior year recommendations. You'll see we had 2 deficiencies on page 10 from the prior year. We consider these implemented this year. So those were addressed and will not be on the report for next year. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Any questions of Jim? Obviously an extensive report, and as a mayor, and I know anybody running an organization, I want to thank staff for the support that has to take place for any audit. It is very, very involved in the record keeping and certainly in answering the questions of the auditors as they go through that report over a period of months. So again, to staff, thank you very much. It's a pretty solid financial report. As each year goes, I think we get stronger financially, and certainly with the help of grants and other funding that take place annually. That also involves certainly more detailed recording and certainly auditing of that monies as it flows through the agency. So again, to staff, thank you. And Jim, to your group, thank you as always. Any questions?
Yes. Thank you again.
All right, we'll move on to another very extensive report that was sent out. I'm sure you stayed up all night reading this, but we are also have the 23 comprehensive annual work plan and budget. Erin.
Well, thank you. So at last month's board meeting, we provided you with an overview and a draft document. This month, we provided you with sort of a fully designed annual budget and work plan document that is our comprehensive budget and our UWP, our Unified Work Program dollars budget for FY 2023. Today, I just wanted to touch on a couple ways that this budget is impacted by our role in supporting the region and the implementation of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act here. I think as we look to our budget, there are a number of new funding opportunities for the region that will result in more active program management. There are new policies that we need to review and analyze and implement. We'll be setting up some new formula programs for faster implementation, and we're excited to hit the ground running just based on our experience working with Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program and others. And then I think one of the biggest things that we are going to be doing over the coming years is really figuring out how we can achieve regional consensus on our priorities to successfully access and unlock the dollars that are available in the 20+ competitive programs across the region. So next slide. So just to highlight, there's more funding for current programs that are coming to the region. So our traditional funding programs that go through the Council of Mayors, as well as the competitive programs that we run here, like CMAC, like the Transportation Alternatives Program. And those increases range from anywhere between 10 and almost 40% in those pots here. So, in many ways, we'll be looking towards our next call for projects to execute on a number of these things. There's new dedicated funding for rail grade crossing. But there also are these new programs that we'll need to establish. So the Protect program, a resiliency program, we've got ongoing work in this next year's budget to be able to do the planning work that's required before you can sort of see the programming benefits of the match ratio going from 80-20 to 90-10 across the region. So I think we will be able to help the region successfully unlock some of these value add propositions here through that. The carbon reduction program, again, is sort of like a CMAC Plus program is how we've sort of been describing it. But again, ready to hit the ground running on a number of those things as well. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there are a ton of new policies to review and implement with the execution of any capital bill, any federal transportation bill that comes to the region here. So if I could have the next slide. I think one of the biggest opportunities that we have here really is to think about how we as a region, can achieve regional consensus on those competitive programs again. We want to think about how we as a region aren't looking like we're fighting amongst ourselves for the resources, but that we've coordinated, that we're prioritizing. And this means sort of working with all of you. It means working with our transportation committee members to understand what's in the program currently, what might be put in the pipeline, and how we can sort of say, this is the program that has this is the project that has the best program that matches it, and it's ready to go next year. But the nice thing about a federal infrastructure bill is you've got 5 years of programming authority. So if your project isn't ready this year, we can work with you to help make sure that it's ready for a future year. Next slide. So just sort of a highlight smorgasbord of the competitive programs. These programs run from major infrastructure programs like the things that fund to create grade rail separations and untangle those that are billions of dollars of projects, to things like healthy streets. So very hyper-local programs and projects that will be competitively available. In some instances, our long-range plan 2050 puts forth that, 290, that the Red Line extension, that, 75th Street, that those are major projects that our region needs to accomplish together, that we'll need to pursue some of those big project programs like MEGA, the Western O'Hare Access, as well. And then those healthy street programs, maybe we need to be working with communities through our technical assistance teams to say, this is a good healthy streets proposal, and how can we help communities get ready to accept that funding? So it's a range of strategies that we'll be working on over the next 12 to 18 months, but wanted to give you just some sort of flavor for those projects. Next slide. I think of utmost importance for me to reinforce here is that our region has been very successful in getting some of these mega program dollars to our region. And we've been successful when we work together, when we speak as one voice, when we've prioritized our projects together, and really taken that data-driven approach here. So I want to make sure that you see us as, a strong convener of the region, that we want to work with you, your councils, with the counties as well, to be able to set up some frameworks, evaluation criteria, and that we're proactively engaging you in this process for what we need to be doing as a region to unlock these dollars. Next slide. So again, you all, because you're board members, I don't think I necessarily need to harp on this, but our role really is to convene you, right? To make sure that we're using our forums as a way for us to really get this information. We have been working directly with USDOT to talk about the notice of funding opportunities that are going to be coming down the pike. We've been making recommendations about how they could be thinking about some of these projects. One of the things that they're talking about right now is a single application for those mega projects. That's something that we already have experience in doing for our CMAC, our TAP, our regionally significant projects that we do here at the regional level, because oftentimes, you know, the implementers are spending so much money putting these applications together that then they have to spend $15,000 or $30,000 to do those cost benefit agreements. And for each of these different pots, I think it's a great opportunity for them to be thinking about a unified application and how that helps them. We've been sharing some insights from our process and policies with them as I've been out here in DC. Next slide. So I just want to touch on some of the specific initiatives. I know that last month my deputy directors went through a number of these, but just some highlights here. So again, we built our FY23 budget with the intent of bringing more federal funding back to the region. You know, we also have activities that are included in there that provide that technical assistance and applied research that provides that foundation level support for all of our transportation plans and programs across the region. Next slide. So some of the unique projects and programs that you'll see in our budget this year, we'll be continuing to set those safety targets for highway safety and thinking about a regional strategy for improving traffic safety across the region is on our agenda. We have been doing a lot of work at the request of the MPO and the Transportation Committee to look at safety. So we've been taking a keen look at crash safety data across the region to figure out if there's something that we can do to help support the processing of that data, so then we can develop the tools and strategies to address intersections and places where there are high crash rates across our region. We know that speeding has been a challenge, and one of the reasons why our fatality rates across our region has been increasing over the past year. So we actually worked with IDOT to get some additional resources to purchase data and begin to analyze data so that, again, we can be more tactical and strategic in our approach for how we address some of the speeding challenges that we've seen just pop up over the past year or two. Next slide. In addition, I've mentioned this a couple times, but our ADA program this year included in the FY23 budget is $2 million for both staff and consultants to support local governments in developing ADA transition plans. We are woefully behind as a region, and we heard from the Federal Highway Administration that one of the things that we need to do in order to keep getting the federal dollars that we get is to come into compliance. So we've developed a program that will probably be 8 to 10 years. So you'll be hearing about me talking about this for quite some time, but we're really kicking this off in this FY23 budget. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there's some resiliency planning that we've already started to look at. So strategies to reduce climate risk, which again helps us think about matching our federal dollars in the new infrastructure bill at 90-10 for projects that help with our resiliency. Next slide. So, and then in addition to all of this, you know, we will be working on a transportation project analysis tool, really sort of trying to bring in some equity considerations into the data and analysis that we already have. We'll be looking at developing a transportation project risk register. What are the barriers that make our transportation projects take longer or not? And what can we be doing as a regional planning agency to help support and reduce those barriers? We're also working with the state on purchasing some new geospatial data that uses artificial intelligence to be able to analyze land uses as it relates to transportation more effectively and faster than having our staff sort of look at aerial photos by themselves and making those decisions. There's some great new tools available, and we're excited to bring this to the region, and also we'll be sharing that data with the rest of the state's MPOs. Again, you know, looking at GIS services that we might be able to support you and the counties and the COGS with as well. We know that, you know, we have lots of great resources and staff, and we want to be able to share that with you. Next slide. So just a couple other sort of baseline things that we do as a region to provide for all of the big projects that happen. If I could have the next slide. You know, we also received a grant last year to develop a regional infrastructure accelerator, $1 million from the Build America Bureau to look at public-private partnerships to figure out, you know, are there more fast, they're better, you know, strategic, more collaborative ways for us to be thinking about our projects and programs. I always like to say, you know, just because I can buy a $5,000 oven doesn't mean I want to spend, you know, it. So is there something that meets my requirements for my baking needs at maybe $1,200 or $800, right? And, you know, can we think about our transportation infrastructure in the same way? Again, we're continuing to look at regionally significant projects for the plan update. Next slide. Also, we're updating the regional socioeconomic forecast. You'll hear a little bit more about that for population, households, total employment as well across the region. And then two, we've got a lot of program management, regional accounting, council assistance. You know, we work with your COGs across the region to look at their calls for projects to help provide them the support to make sure that data and information gets into the tip so that it can get the federal funds moving as quick as possible for you. Next slide. So just back to the numbers. I know we presented some draft numbers last month. Wanted to sort of circle back to those. So next slide. In terms of core operations, we are in the process of developing a new enterprise resource planning system. We've got the sort of requirements built and put together. We'll be putting out an RFP for that. That will help us budget better, produce reports better, make sure that we're tracking our project time, implementation more strategically than we are today. We are also working on payroll and thinking about sort of streamlining some of our hiring portals and tools together. A lot of IT security. I mean, again, you know, we just need to make sure that we are prepared for and being proactively protecting our systems that we have here. And again, we're consistently looking at our HR, finance, procurement, and IT. So you'll see a lot of that in our core operations of our budget. Next slide. Our revenues, again, you know, this year will be right about just under $30 million, an increase of about $6.6 million. About 2/3 of that, or $4.1 million, is coming from the new infrastructure bill. All planning, regional planning agencies, MPOs, their core work program funds come through these big federal bill increases. In addition, we've achieved some success in our grants, working with the state for state planning research funds to be able to do some of this other work, like that Regional Infrastructure Accelerator, which is Build America, USDOT funds, the ADA transition funds. We've got $2 million in this budget, but that's coming through, again, our work closely with IDOT, the Acopia, again, $2.5 million in FY23 as well. And then our local dues have remained unchanged. We will be beginning discussions because you know, this year IDOT has made a commitment to helping us match all of these new federal funds for the region, but at some point we're going to need to, as a region, continue to look at our due structure to make sure that they're matching all of the federal resources that are coming to the region. So next slide. In terms of expenditures, you know, personnel increases by about 26%. Contractual increases are expected at about 42%. We've got a slight increase in occupancy expenses, which we had been budgeting for already. And then you can see that we have some expenses in commodities at about $2.3 million increase, operating increase by about $220,000, and then capital outlay increased by about $58,000. So next slide. So we are requesting approval of the UWP budget and our total comprehensive budget. Our CMAP request is about $22.8 million. We also support the Region Councils of Governments for their core activities and programming that support us here at the region. So there's planning liaisons that you see across the region and probably engage with. We also have a competitive program. This year, CTA came in for a loop rail capacity modeling project to provide them with some data on, you know, what's going on in the loop and how they can support their systems and plan better for the future. You know, and SSMMA came in with a competitive request for ADA planning. We are actually going to take that and leverage the resources that we've built into, instead of funding that. The committee that we worked with on developing this determined that it was best for us to leverage sort of the full resources of the ADA program that we're developing right now to be able to focus on South Suburban mayors and managers area as well. So again, there's a new complete streets requirement in the federal bill, so we do have to set aside funding for that, and we anticipate we're developing the tools, the policies, the strategy for spending that with our transportation partners and with you across the region. I believe that's my last slide here. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions. I know Angela's on the line to answer budget questions as well, but we are seeking your approval of our annual budget and UWP budget.
Motion to approve, Rotering.
Second, Noak.
Moved and seconded. There's got to be some
Karen,
questions.
Question, yeah, or a comment actually. on the work plan part of Aaron, Lindsay Hollander is heading up that state revenue share analysis. And I think it would be really important to figure out the way the paragraph is written. It's talking about, it puts sort of online internet sales in a negative light in terms of what it could do to the traditional sales revenue community we have. I think it's incredibly important to try to get a handle on, and if the state's not doing it, for us to prod them to figure out how much additional revenue is coming into the state now, given the changes in the the internet sales tax. My sense of it is that there are communities receiving revenue that didn't receive it before, so that would probably be an easy enough thing if we got the IDO Department of Revenue sales tax reports. But to try to break down how much additional revenue now is being collected statewide and by municipality because of that. And I don't know, you know, hopefully they're the tools to do it, but I think it could dramatically change how we look at sales tax revenue and what it's doing. Where places with no commercial now will actually have sales tax. It's a new source of revenue for them. And if watching the Amazon deliveries to places in the city, my kids' houses in the city, I gotta believe there's a lot more, or not just Amazon, but revenue coming in. So anyway, that's my comment, just a thought that that's really important for CMAP to get a handle on.
Yeah, we certainly agree with that. And I think there are sort of some interesting opportunities to look at that data and say, how is it benefiting our communities, you know, at the internet point of sales, as opposed to how things were happening previously, but then also to shift and adjust, because the communities that were dependent on some of those point of sales too are experiencing some differences in their revenues as well. So that is, you know, certainly a question that we will dig into, and we can certainly follow up with you in terms of your perspective and how we might approach this. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Having been, this is Mayor Noak, having been a community that's shifted, let's also keep in mind that those shifts also bring additional costs onto those communities that are the basis of delivery for e-commerce. Those are tremendous additional costs as well.
Yep. Nope. Thank you, Mayor Noak.
Other questions? Aaron, just a note, as you continue to hear, I'm sure you hear it also, is about the flow of projects going through the state of Illinois and their ability to process projects. I mean, we've talked about this for years, to finally have additional monies come in, and we have a plan through the agency as to how to disperse that and the requirements involved. But I keep hearing and running into the wall of the state of Illinois not being able to process various projects, and whether or not they've increased staff, have they modified what they've done in the past to help us make these programs flow.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're sort of in a tough situation, like we all are, in terms of hiring and retirements right now. But you are right. I mean, in order to be able to process all of this, they need more resources. And I think anything that we can do from the region to continue to raise this as a critical need is certainly important. And I think that obviously we would be stronger if we did this in partnership with, us, with the mayor's caucus, with our county board chairs, to be able to say that we all have projects that are waiting in the wings, but we can't, we can't.
Yeah, again, I don't know totally to resolve. Obviously, there's federal, the state's going to say there's federal guidelines we have to follow. We have to follow our own guidelines, but certainly I know in the past they've outsourced us that, whether that was successful or not, and maybe that's a move to make in the future to consider in having all this money and have it sit, and or the frustration of the various councils of government is to have a project carry over because it was a delay in the state. Obviously it screws up the entire budgeting, certainly of not only in general with CMAP, but also the requirements of the COGS to move these projects along. So that necessarily hasn't gone away. And now it's going to be even more greater challenge with additional monies coming in, of which we are calling for projects and how they're going to get implemented. So we've waited all these years for the money. The money's starting to come in now, and the state has got to step up. And I don't know whether, certainly the chair is chair of our MPO, why that question can't continually be addressed to him, and whether he's got a plan or certainly a comment to make going forward. It's not that he's that far away. He's chair of the MPO, so.
Yeah, well, at our March meeting of the MPO, I think we can certainly ask him for an update on what they're doing in terms of staffing and being prepared for this. And I know that our board members that represent us on the MPO too, we can make sure that that happens.
And one last question on the digital divide, so to speak. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of federal money and state money coming into that. For many of us who have been kind of on the sidelines for a while because of the cost of doing smart cities technology, has CMAP, and a lot of that's going to be, and hopefully will be, PPP. So are we going to touch upon that or get into that venue at all?
Yeah, one thing that wasn't on the list that I probably should have added to the list was that we've got an EV plan that'll be kicking off and strategies. So we've actually identified a date next month that we're bringing together government and private sector technology folks to talk about what an regional EV plan and strategy could do for the region. And I think you're right? What do those contracts look like on the municipal end? It's not just the energy providers that you're negotiating with. You're negotiating with technology firms that are putting in those EV charging stations. So it's certainly will be scoped out a little bit more next year.
All right, thanks. Any additional questions? There has been a motion and a second to approve the budget. Aaron, call the roll.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye.
Frank Beal.
Aye.
President Brawley. President Darch.
Aye.
Paul Goodrich. Jim Healy. Nina Iramudio.
Aye.
Mayor Noak. President
Yes.
Reinbold.
Aye.
Mayor Rotering.
Could be muted.
Stephen Schaefer.
Yes.
Carolyn Schofield.
Yes.
Ann Sheehan.
Yes.
Matt Walsh.
Yes.
And Diane Williams.
Motion carries. Again, to staff, you saw the 100+ pages of the outline of that budget, and I thought you did a great job in breaking that down, clearly to be legible and certainly easy reading as to how detailed the planning goes in this agency, how significant it is in the impacts, and certainly detailing out the projects, the staff, and the funding source. So again, Aaron, thank you for a very detailed budget.
Thank you.
Item 7, informational items. Update 2050.
Good morning. My name is Jonathan Birch, a planner here with CMAP, and I'm here to share some progress today about the update to the ONTO 2050 regional plan. This is the timeline of the plan update process. The red dot is where we are today. We have made some progress, but there are many important steps to come. At upcoming board meetings, we'll be sharing elements of the plan update, building toward releasing the draft plan and appendices for public comment in June, and bringing the final plan for approval to the board and MPO in October. Today, we'll be covering updates about the socioeconomic forecast for the region provided by David Clark and Alexis McAdams, updates about the financial plan provided by Lindsay Hollander, and we also have a brief update about regionally significant projects.
Hello, my name is Alexis McAdams. I'm an associate analyst with the Research and Innovation team here at CMAP. Together with my colleague David Clark, we'll provide a brief overview on the results of the updated regional socioeconomic forecast that will accompany to the ONTO 2050 plan update. First, we'll discuss the demographic or population portion of the forecast. The ONTO 2050 update demographic forecast follows and builds from the methods and techniques used by Louis Berger, the consultant who produced the original ONTO 2050 socioeconomic forecast. For this update, the demographic modeling tools have been adapted to an in-house platform, which allows CMAP more options for flexibility and customization in the future. We've also updated our base year data to align with 2020 data where possible, although full 2020 census results won't be available until later this year. The primary output of the demographic model is an estimate of the population of the region by age and by sex. This population data is produced not only for the 7-county CMAP region, but also for neighboring multi-county regions that are included in the agency's travel modeling efforts. But today we'll only be covering the results for the CMAP region. We have produced an estimation that the 7-county CMAP region will reach a total population of roughly 10 million persons by the year 2050. When we compare this to the results of the original On to 2050 forecast, shown here in red, we see that the 2050 population estimation differs by about 800,000 people. As I mentioned in the previous slide, we're using much of the same methodology as was used in the original On to 2050 forecast. However, one of the major differences is the update of the base year data from 2010 to 2020. Another contributing factor is the inclusion of the updated employment forecast, which influences the net migration component of the model. We believe that these two factors are the main contributors to a lower population forecast for the region by the year 2050. Next, this chart looks at comparing the characteristics of the 2020 population in dark blue with the 2050 population in teal by age group. Similar to the On to 2050 forecast, we're predicting significant increase in the number of individuals over the age of 65 in the 7-county CMAP region, with more modest increases for other age categories. Finally, here's a chart that describes the population of the region by race and ethnicity. Similar to the On to 2050 forecast, we are expecting to see larger growth in the total number of Hispanic and Asian persons in the region by 2050, with more modest growth for non-Hispanic white, Black, and other populations. This wraps up our brief summary of the demographic forecast results. I'll hand it off to David to discuss the employment forecast. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexis. My name is David Clark, and I'm a Senior Analyst with the Research and Innovation team here at CMAP, and I'll be talking about the updated employment forecast. For the employment forecast, we wanted a process similar to what was done for On to 2050. We contracted with the firm EBP to develop the projections for this cycle. The forecast is broken out by major industry sector and will be reported at 5-year intervals to the plan horizon year of 2050 using Moody's Analytics as the foundation for a baseline or most likely scenario. We also asked the consultants to develop optimistic and pessimistic scenarios based on national macroeconomic assumptions from Moody's. This graph shows estimated employment from 2010 through 2020 and projected employment out to 2050. The region's employment peaked at 4.53 million jobs in 2019 before the COVID-19 pandemic caused it to drop sharply to 4.18 million jobs in 2020. This forecast suggests a relatively quick recovery, with a majority of losses recovered by 2023 and full recovery by 2028. Continued growth is forecasted through 2050, when the region will reach a total of 4.81 million jobs. This represents a 6% gain over 2019 employment and a 15% gain over 2020 employment. The optimistic and pessimistic projections are shown as well on this slide. For comparison, here's how the current employment forecast measures up against the 2050 forecast from 4 years ago. The previous forecast had roughly 600,000 more jobs by 2050 than what is currently being projected. There are two major factors behind this. The first factor is obvious in this chart, and that's the effect of the COVID pandemic, which I discussed in the previous slide. The other factor is more procedural. The original On to 2050 forecast included a human capital plus transportation scenario that we opted not to use in the current forecast. That scenario pushed up the previous employment forecast by 175,000 jobs, a number which represents 27% of the overall difference between this updated forecast and the original On to 2050 forecast.
Good morning. My name is Lindsay Hollander, and I'm going to update you on our progress on the financial plan for transportation. This is the part of the plan where we forecast how much revenue we'll have for the transportation system over the 28-year planning period, and then also estimate how much we will need to spend to maintain the transportation system, operate it, improve the condition of its assets, enhance it, and expand the transportation network. Over the course of the past really year or so, we've been fortunate to receive a lot of help and expertise from many of our partners in developing this forecast, and I'm going to just share a bit about where we're at today. As we were creating the forecast, we realized that a lot has happened since we did this 4 years ago, and all of these developments affect the forecast. For one, really overall, the condition of the transportation system has declined since the adoption of Onto 2050, and this applies to the transit network as well as the region's bridges. At the same time, this region is seeing revenues from federal, state, and local levels that are all higher than previously. So Rebuild Illinois enacted a number of transportation revenues, and more recently, we've had the federal infrastructure bill, IEJA, provide the potential for additional dollars to Northeastern Illinois. But at the same time, we are also in the midst of a pandemic, and that has impacted some of the revenue forecasts, in particular for toll revenue and transit fare revenue. And all these factors and more went into developing the draft baseline forecast that I am about to share with you. So based on what we know now, the region will be forecast to have $60 billion more in revenue under existing sources over the 28-year planning period to operate and maintain the system in its current condition. And keep in mind, particularly with federal revenues, this is really based on the information we have today, and these are our planning level forecasts. And for those of you who have been around for past plans, you probably realize that this is somewhat of a departure from past forecasts where forecasted revenues could not even meet baseline expenditures. And so while this is a positive, there are many other investment priorities that remain. The region has many investment priorities for its transportation network. There's the region's asset condition targets to improve the state of our transit network and our pavement and bridges. There's also the need to ensure sufficient funding for enhancing and expanding the transportation system. And really, in order to do these things, we're going to need to continue to prioritize existing Onto 2050 recommendations for new and innovative revenue sources. And we have a set of draft revenue recommendations here. And these are really largely the same as what we recommended in Onto 2050, but we have made a few refinements. Onto 2050's recommendation for increasing the motor fuel tax and then indexing it to inflation was in fact made a reality. And for this reason, we won't need to implement as much in terms of new revenues in the long term to meet our needs. That said, the motor fuel tax remains unsustainable in the long term. And to deal with increases in vehicle fuel economy, we propose to continue CMAP's recommendation to transition the motor fuel tax to a road usage charge. Next is continuing CMAP's recommendation to expand the sales tax base to additional consumer services. This would bolster the RTA sales tax and make it more sustainable. Next is expanding local parking pricing to more municipalities in the region, which is also a longstanding recommendation of our plan. And lastly, we've proposed to retain the recommendation to implement a regional revenue source for transportation capital investments in the region. For this one, though, we are suggesting a refinement that this source actually be a regional fee on TNC trips, such as those for Uber and Lyft, to make investments that would, one, help offset TNC impacts to congestion, and then two, ensure that TNC users are paying a fair share for their use of the public infrastructure. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Finally, I wanted to give the board a brief update about regionally significant projects. CMAP has been working closely with our transportation partners to gather a list of 69 projects for consideration in the plan update as regionally significant projects, including transit, expressway, and arterial projects. With those in hand, staff are currently evaluating these projects using the same process that was used for On to 2050. Regionally significant projects will in fact be the focus of the On to 2050 update materials that we bring to the board and the MPO Policy Committee during your meetings in March, including a draft list of recommended projects based on the results of that evaluation. Thank you for your time today. All those who have presented about the plan update today are available to answer your questions. Thank you again.
Thank you, Jonathan. Questions? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
I'm sorry.
Any questions for Jonathan or anyone else on the plan update?
Okay.
This is Carolyn. Is it going to be available online, Jonathan? Especially the statistics that were at the beginning?
Yeah, we have made the presentation available, and I will make sure that it gets posted online, but we can send it to you directly too if you're interested in having that handy. So looks like
great, thank you.
A few others were nodding. Yep,
Yes.
we'll get that out to you.
Under other business.
Jerry, Karen,
Yes,
just
go
a
ahead, Karen.
quick question to Aaron. Thanks for meeting with the Bill McLeod and Rod Craig or whatever on the multimodal business. If there's anything to share from that meeting specifically, I'd love to know what they're thinking about. I talked to them at other things, but I just think in representing them on this board, it would be good to know. It will inform my thinking beyond what I know.
And then absolutely, I'd be happy to follow up with you with that.
Thanks.
Do we have any public comments?
Hey, Mayor Bennett, this is Garland Armstrong calling from Des Moines, Iowa. And how's everybody at the CMAP board meeting in Chicago doing?
Everybody's great, Garland.
I just want to call to tell you that this past Monday, me and my wife was at the Des Moines City Hall Council meeting, and I got on the agenda that from Council member Linda Westergaard to appoint me to the Access Advisory Board, seat number 5, for the remaining 4 months of the present term and for a full year 4 term starting June 14th of this year and ending on June 14th, 2026. So this will be my first time doing it right here in Des Moines, Iowa.
Well,
So what do you think about it?
Congratulations, Garland.
Yep. So just want you to know about it.
Thank you. The work continues. The work continues. You're right.
Thanks.
Any other public comment? The board again will meet in March, on March 9th, presumably still on Zoom unless we have something change. And for those on the executive committee, when you end this call, please go to meeting and we will do the executive committee. Any other comments or questions? Again, thank you all for your time. A lot of information today, and Aaron, to you and the staff, good job, and we look forward to next month's meeting. With that in mind, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Reinbold.
Second, Rotary.
Moved and seconded. Aaron, call the roll.
Bennett,
Aye.
Beal,
Yes.
Raleigh, Starch,
Yes.
Goodrich, Healy, Nina Itamudia,
Yes.
Mayor Noak,
Yes.
President Reinbold,
Yes.
Mayor Rotering,
Yes.
Stephen Schaefer,
Yes.
Carolyn Schofield,
Yes.
Ann Sheehan,
Yes.
Matt Walsh,
Yes.
and Diane Williams.
The motion carries. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.